Most people think anxiety is a flaw, something to fix, a chemical imbalance, a weakness of the mind. But Friedrich Nietzsche wouldn't agree. He wouldn't tell you to calm down. He wouldn't ask you to breathe. And he definitely wouldn't recommend mindfulness apps. Nietzsche believed that your suffering, especially your anxiety, is a signal, a calling, a brutal, necessary proof that you are still becoming who you truly are. And the more you resist it, the more it owns you. You see, most people don't want to understand their anxiety. They want to numb it, silence it, package it in a pill. They want it to go away so they can return to the life that caused it. But Nietzsche would ask you something different. What if this discomfort is not your enemy, but your compass? What if the tightness in your chest is not something to erase, but something to listen to? Because anxiety isn't just panic, it's existential. It's the soul whispering, you're not living right. And Nietzsche, madman, poet, philosopher, he saw this long before modern psychology gave it a label. In this video, we're not going to fix you. We're going to tell you the truth, the terrifying, liberating, honest truth about anxiety, and why Nietzsche might be the only person bold enough to make you face it. So if you're ready for that kind of conversation, not a cure, but a confrontation, keep watching, because what you'll hear next might change how you see every anxious thought you've ever had. Friedrich Nietzsche lived most of his life in physical pain, mental torment, and isolation so deep it would break most people before they turned 30. And yet, from that suffering, he gave the world some of the most explosive, liberating, and dangerous ideas it had ever seen. Not despite his anxiety, but because of it. To Nietzsche, suffering wasn't a mistake. It was a requirement, a doorway to depth. He believed that discomfort wasn't something to be removed, but rather something to be understood, endured, and ultimately transcended. And this is where most people today go wrong. Because when anxiety shows up in your life, when you wake up with that tight chest, the restlessness, the sinking sense that something's not right, your first instinct is to escape it, to scroll, to self-medicate, to avoid the conversation, the task, the silence. But Nietzsche would say, that impulse to avoid is the exact reason your life feels meaningless. He'd say, that feeling in your chest, that is the call to become more than what you are. Not because you're broken, but because you are unfinished. You see, Nietzsche didn't view anxiety as an illness of the weak. He saw it as a symptom of being too aware in a world that prefers sleep. A world where most people chase comfort and call it success. Where you are trained from childhood to follow the path that's been paved for you and to panic the moment you even consider stepping off of it. But Nietzsche's entire philosophy is built on the idea that meaning is not found. It is created. And creation is violent. It is painful. It demands the death of the old self. So when your anxiety whispers that something is off, it may not be a flaw in your wiring. It may be the early signs of awakening. Because the people who feel the most anxious are often the ones who are still capable of feeling deeply, who still haven't gone fully numb to the quiet tragedy of modern life, who still sense that their job, their routine, their relationships, their entire identity may be a shallow imitation of the life they were meant to live. And Nietzsche would ask, why do you assume your pain is a problem to fix instead of a message to decode? Why do you pathologize your soul's rebellion? What if your anxiety is not proof that you're losing control, but proof that you're still alive enough to want more? Anxiety isn't just panic attacks or shallow breathing. It doesn't always come with alarms and drama. Sometimes it's just a quiet dread you carry in your chest for so long that you forget what life felt like without it. It's walking into a room full of people you know and still feeling like a stranger. It's staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. while your mind replays every awkward conversation you've ever had. It's telling people, I'm just tired, because saying, I don't know who I am anymore, would scare them away. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're just paying attention, because modern life has mastered the art of keeping us busy, but not fulfilled. You can spend an entire day being productive and still fall asleep feeling useless. You can hit every goal you set this year and still feel like nothing changed inside you. You can be surrounded by friends, likes, followers, and still feel like no one actually sees you. This is the reality of anxiety in the 21st century. It's a symptom of being stretched too thin, distracted too often, and rewarded for avoiding the truth. It's trying to keep up with a version of yourself that was never real to begin with. Nietzsche wouldn't call this a disorder. He would call it a crisis of meaning. And he'd say, good, let it collapse. Because from his point of view, this collapse is where the real work begins. He didn't believe we were meant to be comfortable. He believed we were meant to evolve. And anxiety to him wasn't a malfunction. It was a message. The snake which cannot cast its skin must die, Nietzsche wrote. As well the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind. Let that sink in. Your anxiety may not be a threat. It may be a signal that you've outgrown your current skin, that the life you're living is too small, too safe, too rehearsed for the person you are becoming. You might feel anxious every morning before you go to work, not because you're weak, but because your body knows this job is slowly erasing your spirit. You might dread checking your messages not because you're antisocial, but because your life has become a performance and you're tired of pretending. You might panic in silence, in stillness, not because you're broken, but because that stillness finally gives space for a deeper voice to emerge, one that's been buried under deadlines, diets, noise, and expectations for far too long. And still, we label it as something to fix, something to medicate, something to hide. But what if your anxiety isn't there to destroy you? What if it's there to save you? What if it's the last real part of you crying out for change? Nietzsche would argue that anxiety is the soul's resistance to being boxed in, to being reduced to numbers, roles, likes, income, reputation. He would say that if you feel anxious, there is still something wild inside you that refuses to be domesticated. And that's not weakness, that's a gift. Because the moment you stop running from your anxiety and start listening to it, that is the moment your life begins to change. Not because the pain goes away, but because it finally starts to make sense. You stop asking, how do I get rid of this? And you start asking, what is this trying to show me? That shift changes everything. You start to see that your anxiety doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're still awake, still sensitive, still connected to the parts of you that long for something real, something meaningful, something earned. You may not know what that something is yet, but Nietzsche would say, that's okay, because confusion is a sacred state. It means the old story no longer fits, and the new one hasn't been born yet. And that right there is the threshold, the uncomfortable, beautiful space between who you were told to be and who you actually are. If you're in that space right now, if you feel restless, anxious, uncertain, and raw, don't numb it. Don't run. Stay. Because in that anxiety lies your freedom. Not instantly, not easily, but slowly, painfully, honestly. Nietzsche would say that the very fact that you feel this unease means that your life is still in motion, and anything in motion can be transformed. What if your anxiety is not a cry for escape, but a challenge? A challenge to rise, to confront the hollowness in your habits, to destroy the parts of you that were never yours to begin with. This is what Nietzsche understood better than most, that the path to becoming who you are is not paved with comfort. It is carved by fire, by grief, by long nights where nothing makes sense and the silence feels unbearable. But that silence, Nietzsche would say, is sacred, because it's in that silence that the mask begins to slip. It's in that silence that you realize you've spent your whole life trying to be good, acceptable, efficient, productive, and now you are exhausted, anxious, and quietly starving for something real. He would never tell you to numb that ache. He'd tell you to enter it, to look at it, to let it tell you what you're not saying out loud, and to let that truth ruin the version of yourself that was built just to survive. Because that's where the real work begins. In the ruins, in the aftermath, in the ashes of everything you thought you were supposed to want. You've been taught to fear suffering, to hide your wounds, to treat discomfort like an error message, something to troubleshoot and fix. But Nietzsche flipped the entire script. He believed that the person who suffers and keeps going, the person who feels everything and still refuses to go numb, that person is becoming dangerous, unstoppable, free, because pain, when faced honestly, makes you stronger than illusion ever could. The goal is not to eliminate your anxiety. The goal is to earn the kind of life that makes that anxiety meaningful, to live in a way that demands everything from you and gives back not ease, but depth. To wake up not asking, how can I avoid suffering, but rather, what can I suffer for that's worth everything? Because if you have no reason to suffer, then no life will ever feel good enough. No job, no partner, no city, no number in your bank account will silence the ache. But if you know what you're here to build, what you're here to live for, what you're here to say with your one short life, then you can endure almost anything. He who has a why to live, Nietzsche said, can bear almost any how. So maybe the real task isn't to get rid of the pressure in your chest. It's to create a life that deserves that pressure, to become the kind of person who can carry it, who can transform it, who can channel it into something that echoes after they're gone. And no, that won't be easy, but Nietzsche never promised ease. He promised meaning, and meaning is not found. It is forged, one hard truth at a time. So the next time anxiety comes knocking, don't run. Sit with it. Ask it why it's here. Ask it what you've been avoiding. Ask it what life you're ready to leave behind. And then listen, because in that trembling silence, you may hear something you haven't heard in a long time. Yourself. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. Not to me, but to the part of you that's still alive enough to feel this deeply. If this made you think, if this made you pause, then maybe you're not lost after all. Maybe you're just beginning.